Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table. Welcome back. You are listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. My name is Seth Krussman, and joined here today in studio live for our listening audience. Mr. Ben Brayshaw, would you please identify yourself?
I'm Ben Brayshaw. How you doing, Seth?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm just having a good time creating awkward moments in this space.
You're good at doing that. You're really good at doing that regularly on this show. I appreciate that. Very, very little.
Yeah, one of these days we're gonna do a highlight reel of cringy moments on Money on Tap, and it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm sure we'll get a lot of downloads from our subscriber base on that. Cringy moments.
Oh my gosh, the power of post editing is really a gift here for all of you folks. Just in case you're wondering. That's how it works here at Money on Tap. We have a lot of fun as financial planners. We get an opportunity to bring to the table what ideas and what concepts and what things are important to us, and taking a look and working with our clients and bring it to you. Hopefully all of what we talk about today is something that you get a chance to gather around the kitchen table and have that kitchen table financial discussion, or that planning that you get to do. And maybe down the road we get a chance to work together. Today, we have we do have a good show. I feel like, it's why would we not bring a good show to the table?
Yeah, I definitely don't think we're going to say, hey, we're going to have a bad show for you today and we want you to keep listening. So we're just going to keep going with a good show over and over again. Actually, Seth, this show kind of came together on its own, and it was kind of interesting how it came together, and I'm excited for it. I mean, I love the topics we talk about. I mean, everyone knows, we're both passionate about financial planning. We're passionate about three-dimensional investing. We're passionate about communicating that to everyone we possibly can, because we believe there's just not enough bandwidth out there to cover the needs of the financial awareness that has to happen. And I'm excited about bringing this show, because it really talks about a couple things that are misnomers in the retirement world, and I think people need to break the rules a little bit.
Well, while you are the rule breaker, I will be the rule maker, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be making and breaking retirement rules for you folks. So, because we know that there's probably one of you in the relationship that is absolutely going to be all about breaking the rules, and then there's the other that's going to be sitting there saying, there's no way.
Our general audience can guess which one is which on this show right now.
Yeah, we did a show on retirement personalities a while ago. That was kind of more in line with maybe who you are in terms of how you invest, and in your relationship. There's usually one person covers one side, the other person covers the other, and it flip-flops for us too, right? It kind of depends on what you're shopping for, I think, if you're the Uber shopper or if you're the Uber saver.
Yeah, you know what? How you approach things in life in every domain is exactly correlated to how you're going to interpret, respond, react, reject, embrace. I mean, that is the core, right? Your person is what it's amazing. I love watching people. I love getting to know people. I love understanding why they are who they are and what they want out of life, and I love putting that into a plan. I am the intermediary. That's how I envision what we do here. And, taking those pieces and putting it together well. I mean, we're not a perfect fit for everybody, that's for sure. But, finding that person that understands you and does that, then you can look at these rules that we're going to talk about today and you can figure out which ones you want to really embrace and which ones you can embody in finding your success in financial planning and making your retirement a reality.
Before we get going too far down the road with that, I'm going to pump the brakes here a little bit, folks, and go ahead and take us into money in the news. Well, for starters, A stands for Apple, which is where we're going to get going today. It's Apple in the news, and they are in an epic battle in the courts. And what is that all about? Well,
wow, you're using puns all over the place, Seth. I don't know all the literary terms that apply there, but that was good.
Yes. Well, oh my gosh. We're gonna talk a little bit about Apple, obviously. So Apple Store was placed in the hands of a California federal judge this last week. And the judge listened to closing arguments from the tech giant, that's Apple, and also from Fortnite, that's David. We got David and Goliath here. And Fortnite is a developer developed by Epic Games. And what is going on with that is Epic Games is saying, hey, it is a illegal monopoly for Apple to force developers to distribute its app exclusively through the Apple Store, exclusively use Apple's payment processing service, require them to pay the iPhone maker a 30% commission on app sales. And this is maybe a bigger deal than people might think, because, it's nothing new for Apple to get in the news for being in some legal battle.
I know, they're constantly in a legal battle. That stock has traded sideways for the longest time. It's like 2% or something off its 50-day moving average. It's, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on there. And, I think some of this stuff is really what's driving a little bit of this. It's interesting when I look at some of the math here on a stock like this. I'm kind of like, oh, well, it's actually like a little over 3% off its 50-day moving average. It's about 2% down off of its 200-day moving average. So you think about it, like this stock has really not excelled over the last 6 months. It has not done well. So I mean, you're looking at the markets rising, things are happening, we're hitting all-time highs. It seems like every other day or week or whatever, and Apple's not. And so I think when you hear articles like this, you start saying to yourself, oh, maybe this is what's driving it. Now, Apple, I think it's really interesting. I mean, a 30% commission is a huge commission on any industry, you name it. I don't know anything like that. Tim Cook doesn't testify on these types of things. But what's really scary is that this is like 20% of Apple's revenue. I mean, this is just a cash cow. I mean, this is $274 billion in total revenue for the year. So this app piece is very interesting. I mean, they've been challenged by Congress. I mean, the monopoly issue. I mean, they literally, they just took Parler off, basically, or whatever it was. They shut them down. Amazon shut them down. I mean, that's a significant amount of power to say, no, you're not in the game anymore. We're going to close your business because it's right here. And but Apple didn't just do it. Amazon was involved, and Microsoft was involved. But these people are shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. I think what's interesting is Apple's take, or their argument, is that this is going to create vulnerabilities in their security. And I think there's some potential truth to that, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned that Tim Cook doesn't testify, but he did in this circumstance, and really that was the primary argument that Tim had to bring to the table. I call him Tim because
first name basis.
Totally.
He's talking about Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, folks. If you don't know him that way, Seth does, so it's hard for him.
So Tim Cook basically said that it was an experiment that he wouldn't want to run, and that was based off of that security piece. And you did mention one of the numbers there, the $274 billion of total revenue for the year. But the segment that is broken out for the App Store, where they bundle Apple Music and TV and iCloud and other sources, is $53.7 billion. and that's 20% of Apple's 274 billion in total revenue. So it is I
misspoke on that. Yeah, my bad.
Easy. I mean, shoot, it's easily done.
I just
I
wanted
forgive
to
you.
numbers.
I forgive you. But I mean, it's a huge piece. It really, and that was the thing, is like is that that really what you were talking about there, Ben, is it is significant when taking a look at what is Apple driving through these apps, and the solution that Epic is looking for is just a third party space that they can distribute the app through, and that circles back to that statement by Tim Cook that this is something that could really jeopardize its security.
Well, Apple's made there's a couple different things that have happened here. Apple basically said, all right, listen, okay, they almost acknowledged they're overcharging, because they basically said after Epic filed the suit, they began reducing commissions for companies that make less than $1 million down to 15%. I've watched YouTube videos and all sorts of different things on, I don't know, Instagram or whatever, where these guys are out there saying things like, hey, we can't even afford to get our platform on Apple because we're not making any money yet. So there's been some stuff, but they don't charge anything for free apps. So if your app is free, but you sell stuff through the app, then that's different, right? So, these are people who are actually selling physical apps. You got to buy the app and it does everything you're looking to do. So there's probably some ways you get around this stuff, right? You do this, you do that, and whatever. But then you buy it through your Apple iTunes store, and then you're getting probably whammed again by Apple. So there's probably issues around all of this stuff. I think it's interesting, Epic Games, Fortnite has been a surging, thing among the youth. It's a game. It's a competitive hunting game, basically, if you want to call it that. And, basically, they're big enough to argue this. That's the problem I think we have, is we have a country where you have to be so significantly big that you have to actually have an argument. I'm personally concerned about the level of power companies like Apple and Microsoft do have. I think it's not a healthy environment. I am a pro-capitalist. So am I an ultra-capitalist? I guess not in that statement. So there's some complication inside some of this stuff, because if all of a sudden a giant like this who has so much impact, do they create? I don't know what Tim Cook would do. I've seen them with their Macintosh computers. They've basically created where you could run Windows on a Macintosh, but basically it creates a whole separate area. You can't commingle it. So they create like a subdivision in the hard drive. And I could see something like that being allowed just to kind of placate everybody. But, people buy an Apple phone, you're signing up for Apple. You just think that they should have an open source conversation and get paid a fair share. Now, I don't want it to be, hey, listen, if you want an Apple phone because that's the best, Microsoft's cheaper. That's where competition comes in. So, I use Apple. I have an Apple phone. Not happy with everything Apple's doing, but it's the player I've chosen. So, a little bit of back and forth on that, Seth.
Well, we are a house divided here. Kira has an Apple phone and I have an Android. And I know there's, the argument both ways, but so be it, choose one or another. Anyways, I think one of the things that I wanted to come back to is on that stock price trading sideways. And in what do we see as far as an Apple, what's Apple look like down the road? We had a little bit, just a brief discussion around this, but Ben, your thoughts, and then I'll add mine.
Yeah, I think, I own Apple. We have Apple in our portfolios. We have everybody, I think everyone everywhere has some level of Apple exposure. And that's almost industry-wide, because they're a $1 trillion company. Their revenue, like you said, is $274 billion. That's $250 billion a year. So to not have exposure to, a financial giant like that, who has a massive impact in revenue sources all over the place, is, that's why it's like, 10 or 15% of, your SPY investment or whatever it is, So there's different things out there. I don't even know what the percentage is SPY, but it's large with Apple. And yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily have it as a buy. I don't have it as a sell. I guess I have it as a hold. I'm not telling people to go buy it, but I think there's these types of things going on are causing it to go sideways. These concerns. Is their revenue going to drop drastically because the judge says, hey, listen, if someone, whatever, you can only charge 10%? I mean, that's a revenue drop.
So here's what I know, and I think, Ben, you share this.
Is this what Tim told you?
Yeah, Tim and I had this conversation. So how does the market respond to what it doesn't understand or it's uncertain about? And you can kind of trace back whatever the event is in the market. The market will pull back when it's just uncertain. And what the market likes is certainty. And so in watching what's happened with Apple in recent history and where it's been trading lately, I could see if the judge comes back with a favorable outcome for Apple, stock pushes forward. If it comes back with finding for Apple, the stock pulls back even more from where it's at. But what I would propose is that regardless of those, that once the market understands the information, it will move higher. And is Apple vulnerable? Absolutely. But I would anticipate it, kind of moving a little bit and then tracking north again.
Yeah, I think this is one of the problems, though. I look at that and I say you're right, but at the same time, I'm thinking about the chip manufacturers. They can't get these chips out fast enough.
I felt really confident in what I was saying there, and then you throw in chip manufacturing and you blew it all up.
Oh, well, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, so I agree with everything you just said. If you can't get a chip to make a phone, you can't sell it. I mean, you can have a order entry as long as galaxies, but it's not going to make a difference if you can't produce a phone. I think they're probably going to be a priority. Companies are all going to make the Apple a priority because they don't want to lose them as a customer. But it's still going to be limitations, and Apple's going to be like, yeah, we have to understand. I mean, I'm looking at the semiconductor space saying, man, we both believe there's a lot of room to run there potentially, just because the demand is just so pent up.
Supply and demand. Yeah.
And then you've got these EV cars, and everyone needs we need chips up the wazoo just for the EV cars that everyone's pushing. And when the Biden administration pushes oil and gas, and you go fill up your car and it's $5 a gallon in a year, and you're looking, hey, that Ben Brayshaw guy was right. That's going to push you into buying the EV car.
Article number 2 comes to us from Chicago, and it's an NBC featured article that was published in May, and it is titled "Sleeping Giant: Thieves Target Retirement Accounts." Of course, this gets our attention because, as it should, we want to make sure that we are aware of what is going on in our industry and making sure that our clients and are prepared and you're aware. But this was actually really pretty cutting edge in what's happening in terms of the retirement accounts, where there is theft, there's identity theft, and a couple losing over $40,000 from their Fidelity account.
This was shocking to me, Seth. I mean, I read this like 3 times because I was like, what? So anyways, I guess this couple, I know we don't have a lot of time on this because we spent so much time in the Apple article, but this couple's password got hacked. The guy, the person, whatever, created a dummy account over at Chase, a real account at Chase Bank, changed their phone number, did a verification code, transferred $40,000 to Chase Bank, and then got it out. It was during the pandemic. The market was going down. They were losing money, I guess, and they didn't even notice. They just thought it was a part of the overall dynamic. I guess, they've been married 46 years, so they probably had a considerable amount of money. And this person figured there was enough money to probably not be noticed right away. So that means that they're fairly wealthy, but they were pretty irritated. They contacted Fidelity, and Fidelity told them tough luck. I mean, they said, they threw out a 30-day rule. They said they were responsible, that they're not responsible for identity theft. And, I was shocked by that response.
Yeah, that was a really hard line for Fidelity to take. I would say they call them K and J in the article, that when the phone number was getting changed, that Fidelity could have reached out to confirm that request, and it just would have taken a phone call. And it's standard practice for our office, right? If there's something like this going on within our clients' accounts, or if there's, for instance, some money being moved, there is a verification process that we are required by our compliance department to follow up with, and it has to be an in-person conversation. And as much as, we might even feel confident that the nature of the conversation is, very common for a client to maybe email and start or initiate a conversation that way with us, the follow-up always has to happen in person. So people overseas, if you're traveling, all those kind of things that we see thrown into the mix here, where people are trying to gain access to client funds and move money. Every conversation has to happen with the person in person.
Yeah, I think about this stuff and the fact that Fidelity just had a hard line on this thing. I mean, just to bring it around, because Fidelity did make good on it when the NBC 5, Chicago 5 had contacted them. I think they were like, we're going on the news for this. This is bad. But I mean, we have cybersecurity protection. We have fraud protection on all this stuff. We have a system in place to try to prevent that, because just losing the money is not the end all. It's the complications behind that, right? Resolving that. We can resolve it. We're covered for resolution. I'm shocked Fidelity's not. They must be fearful that they have a security problem to not cover that and have such a hard line. Because if they're not properly insured for that, I would be concerned. This is a big deal. And, we pay for insurance. There's errors and omissions insurance, but we also pay for cybersecurity insurance that helps protect us all and our clients. Mm-hmm. So those are the types of things that we have in place to try to mitigate this stuff.
Yeah, this isn't the first time actually Fidelity's hit our radar this last year. There was some accounts getting locked out.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah. And that was actually during the pandemic.
People couldn't trade. People
couldn't access. People couldn't see. It was just...
I think the article really points to the one big fear, because it's not about Fidelity. There's all these companies. Every company has their holes or their issues potentially. We try to mitigate the holes that we know exist. What I think is interesting is that the article talks about that retirement plans and retirement accounts have some of the least security out of almost any of the accounts out there. And that's concerning, because that's where the majority of Americans' wealth is in their home and then their retirement accounts. And so when you think about that, that's something to really be, very fearful.
Folks, that's going to do it for us with Money in the News. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are making rules and breaking rules here on Money on Tap. Can't wait to get down into what are these rules that we're making and what are the rules that we're breaking when it comes to retirement planning. You're listening to Money on Tap. We'll be right back. Folks, we have a lot of fun doing this show, Money on Tap, and Ben and I have been financial planners for years and years, and our goal here with you is to bring you into the room, have the conversations that we have. We think these are critical conversations for you, but we understand this is a limited space, and what we'd love to do is to open the doors to you with us at Brayshaw Financial Group, so you could experience what it means to have three-dimensional planning in your life. Let's take a look at all sides of your situation, your scenario, and see how we can put together the best plan possible, taking into account your risk. How much can you have in the market? How much do we need to have set aside and doing different things for your life? That's what we do as planners, how we engage with you, and we welcome you to do that with us. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Now, if you have $250,000 that are investable assets today, our planning is free to you. We want you to have the playbook to have a successful experience in retirement. Give us a call, 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Ben and I welcome you to Brayshaw Financial for complete wealth management.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben and Seth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info at yourmoneyontap.com. And we are going to be jumping into retirement rules that we make and the retirement rules that we break. So there's something for everybody here today. And we have a lot of fun putting this together. So for starters, Ben, we kind of went around. Which one do we start with? Do we go with break first or make first? And you know what? We're going to start making rules right out of the gate because you got to have the rules in order to break them, right?
I think you're right, Seth. I mean, we fooled around with that, but I think honestly, yeah. Let's talk about what the foundational pieces are. We always talk about foundations. Where do you start? And we got. I mean, there's 1,000 rules I could come up with, but we came up with 4 and 4 rules to make, and I got 4 rules we can break, and I love breaking rules.
For starters, we're going to make a plan, and we're going to stick to it. We really, within this, we tuck in this idea of investing with intention, and what we're looking to try to accomplish here is just some parameters. We're going to give ourselves some bumpers to make sure that we get down to those pins and we knock them all over. If you've ever done any bowling with those bumpers, but when we shift in any of these things, it's intentional. It's with thought, and we really are only trying to make these shifts when we're running it by a professional. Because we could come up with a new plan every day if that's what we're doing. And really, it's not going to allow you to get there and to accomplish the goals that you've set out and work within, the parameters of, returns within a market or the tools that we're using to try to create usually income within that. And living within a budget is, potentially part of what that looks like for you.
Yeah, Seth, I like that Andy Stanley. It's a Bible study I did years and years ago that it's called Guardrails, and I love the idea of the visual of the car going down the road. And you got these guardrails on both sides. You never intend to hit the guardrail, but the guardrail is there to protect you. It's like it's the bumper car, right? It's it's that thing you never want to hit it, but it's there if you need it. Same idea of you bowling. I mean, bowling's a good example too, right? You got those rails going down so you don't go into the gutter. It's the same concept. And, making a plan is the guardrails. We hope not to have the bad scenario of the plan. It'd be great if we had the good scenario. You're probably not going to be on either side of those guardrails with a good planner. But you have the guardrails. Because you can't plan for every contingency, but there's things you can do to make retirement strong and be what you want. I mean, there's just so many pieces that we're going to get into here. Yeah. But yeah, those guardrails are really important, and that's why we say make a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you don't even know if you hit a guardrail yet.
I'm reminded actually of that Fidelity commercial. We just talked about Fidelity quite a bit, but it's the commercial where it's the couple that comes in and sits down and, their son-in-law and daughter are moving into the city. And so they have a grandchild and they say plans change. And I think that's kind of the tagline that they've got there. And I think that's a really interesting concept and one that we work with all the time. I think what we're trying to say here is not that, life doesn't happen and that we don't have the ability to shift the direction that we're going. I mean, great, the pandemic. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing this show is really because we're going to break some rules that have been pretty hard and fast in the industry. But post-pandemic, we've just learned so much about being versatile, being nimble, being able to change plans. But the point I think is here is if, like, for instance, you have your your Google Maps or your Apple Maps or wherever you're going, and you can see the fastest route that it's going to take you. But sometimes there's an obstruction. There's something happening down the road you can't see, you're not aware of. And that's where in the planning world, we come alongside you and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get off at this next exit. We're going to do a little detour here. And then we're going to, see some countryside, and we're going to get it back on track. Ultimately, we're going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and this kind of number 2 tandems into this a little bit, and it might be some crossover, but, maintaining a disciplined investment approach. Some people would call this asset allocation, focusing on your asset allocation, maintaining that, maybe you're 60-40. But, people say, hey, listen, you want to own a certain amount of equities and bonds. Take your age, subtract, that, and that's the percentage of bonds you should own. As you get older, your bond allocation should get bigger, and and own less stocks. But maybe the market's not the way you're. Bonds have really taken a hit. We've talked about that on the show multiple times. The yields are lower. People are concerned about inflation, and if rates go up, the bonds you buy today will be worth less tomorrow. There's all those concerns, but maybe you are looking to dislocate from that traditional asset allocation model. Maybe you have a new version of an asset allocation model, but whatever it is, make it a disciplined approach, understand the pros and cons. Maybe you want to take on more risk. Maybe you want to own stocks instead of bonds on maybe you're going to say, I'm going to take my age 150 and subtract it or something. I don't know. But whatever that is, especially if you're going to dislocate from a standard, do that with a professional. That's not something to fool around and say, oh, I just think this works. And don't jump around. That's why I always tell people, I always think of that song, jump around. I'm not going to sing it for anybody, but I think about that. And it's like it's like this, I've seen it like on TV. I don't know, a Coke commercial. I don't know who does it, and you see everyone's jumping it looks meaningless. It has no real design. It's not, you're just jumping to jump, and people do that. And that's a really costly and usually very poor investor outcome scenario. So I always tell people, maintain a disciplined approach. And if you have to adjust the sails. You're still sailing in the same direction, but maybe the wind changes, and that's where the adjustment comes.
So a little bit of history here. Why are we saying these are things that we need to stick with, or we're going to go ahead and break? If you take a look at how long some of these rules have been around, I mean, this goes back to before ETFs. Mutual funds were not very common. People had just stocks and bonds, and that was what they were buying these individual things, or equities or bonds with. And equities, we mean stocks, but now that could be a mutual fund, that could be an ETF, it could be all these different things to create that side of the equity portfolio. And it's been around for a long, long time. So what has changed in the industry? Ben mentioned yield, which was predominantly where people would go for distributions and income. And the idea here was that the math around this was we're going to have a more volatile, more equity portfolio the younger you are, moving towards that bond side being greater as you get closer to income needs and retirement. And what that would do would stabilize that portfolio and create more income. And we're still saying here, this is really critical for you to not get way over your skis and just be, holding on for dear life with an equity portfolio in retirement and trying to figure out how to create income from that. On the other side of that, you can't have too much in the side of like that bond side where you're just not generating enough for you to live on. And so it's really understanding what is the right balance. And there's ways to craft that income outside of the traditional equity bond side that ultimately can bring a greater enhancement to your retirement income, and some of these strategies that are more long-term that you can participate in to ultimately not outlive the assets that you've created to move through retirement.
No, that's well said, Seth. That's well said. I think number 3, and this is a rule to keep forever, don't take lump sum distributions from retirement. That is probably the worst way to access money. Lump sum distributions just create a almost invariably bad scenario in your portfolio. And I see this happen. It's like the market's always down when people do lump sum distributions, and that compounded loss just kills them. And we use that analogy where, if you have 100% of your money and you take out, if the market goes down 10%, you're down to 90% of your money. And then you take out 10%, you take out, 9% at that point at 90%, you're down to 81% of your money. Now, mathematically, it's about 24% to get back to square one. Now, you have to outperform this 10% loss in the market with a 24% return. I mean, it's really...
Well, that just doesn't make any sense, though.
I know.
I mean, I take a 10% loss. I should only have to take get 10% to be back in the game, right? Why 24%?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. That's the way the math works. So, I think the thing is that lump sum distributions create that. We always encourage people to build a cost analysis of all of your expenses. Break it down. Figure out what it is monthly. Even if you pay something annually, I encourage people to take it out monthly. It's called dollar cost averaging. Most people use that as an investment style to invest into, but it should also be a take out of. And people who do these lump sums almost invariably get hit hard at a particular time. Like if you take your money out every end of March, April, second quarter, and you did that last year during COVID, market was down 36% at one point. That's a huge hammering. Number 3, don't take lump sums from your investments. Number 4. Okay, so this is our last one that we want you to keep for today. And this is going to be a simple one. Know your state tax rules, specifically on Social Security and pensions. Some states, 37 states, don't tax on Social Security. We chatted about this before. And some states don't even tax on pensions. And that would be really, really important to understand, to always evaluate your taxes. Try to find a location, a place you might love to live. It can be a huge saver for you in retirement. I mean, make retirement a travel scenario. Maybe you're living in one state, and then they change the rules. Maybe you move to another state. Those are types of things. Those are costs to retirement that can be avoided, that can be, maintained and managed through. So know your state tax rules. Get out of those tax-heavy states. Get out. Those will change your retirement opportunities significantly.
There you have it, folks. 4 rules to make. And we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to get into the fun part of the show. We're going to start breaking some rules here. We got 4 of them for you to break in retirement. This is a lot of the stuff that has been handed down over the generations in retirement planning. And frankly, it's just not what works today. And we can't wait to get into it. You're listening to Money on Tap. We'll take a quick break. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We'll be right back.
For a number of our listeners, they have a lot of questions, and you might be one of them. Today, we're just offering what we call Zoominars, webinars over Zoom meeting rooms where we have top experts, Social Security, estate planning, and financial planning experts for you to speak with, do a private consultation that way today. We're also having webinar-based Zoominars where we're going to have multiple groups where you can be part of that and enjoy that as well. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com to schedule your Zoominar.
More Money on Tap in just a moment. There are a lot of pieces to helping our aging parents in the final chapters of their lives. On this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, Seth and Ben look at the importance of addressing our parents' finances, something that needs to be handled with a certain amount of urgency.
Financial conversation can be one of those bridges that just takes more time than maybe some of the others to really cross. So, whether there's medical needs or immediate right now or in the future, really just being aware of the finances here is what we're trying to talk about, is trying to just, think about what it is that your parents are doing and how they are engaging in their finances. Is it a checkbook? Are they online? Are they using, credit cards? How many do they have? How they operate around their finances is even just a conversation about possibly that can introduce this and help that conversation move forward.
Absolutely. And what we do is we provide a listing. We provide online access. We provide, documentation for a complete list of assets depending on the person's scenario. But we've done that for attorneys, for accountants, for people's kids. We encourage people to bring their kids into our office. We want them for two reasons. One, we want them to know what their parents own, why they own it, okay, and what the purpose of it is. Because after a plan's been put in place, having kids come in to evaluate a plan and figure out whether they think it's good, bad, or indifferent makes things much more messy than trying to understand why they went into this initially. And I really always encourage that, and I know Seth does too. So
thanks for joining us for this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, with great tips from the pros in three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. Now back to Money on Tap with Ben and Seth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are getting down to the last half of our show, where we're talking about the retirement rules for breaking. To get us started here, this is one of the most common that comes across our desk, I'd say, is the wait to 70 to take Social Security. Now, first of all, why? Why would we wait till 70 to take Social Security? Well, it is the maximum. If you've postponed your Social Security, you're taking your Social Security, it has been adding up and building up, and basically at age 70, that's it. You're going to start taking your Social Security at the maximum that you're going to be able to receive. And it's nice because that's going to be the highest payout you can get for the rest of your life. Or if you happen to have a spouse, and let's say that you have the higher of the Social Security numbers and you've postponed that Social Security, so that not only do you get the maximum payout, but when you pass away, that number, that income will pass over to your spouse. And what we're just finding out here is that it's not the rule that applies to everybody. And why would we want to break that rule? Ben?
Yeah, no, this is the number one rule you should want to break. Waiting till 70, that might be a planning strategy that you might implement, and it might make sense for you. But I would tell you that invariably I would encourage people to look at strategizing around Social Security, collect that income almost as soon as you can, depending on your scenario. Sometimes you have a scenario where you want to collect and you've got income and you're trying to figure out about the add back in, and, $1 for every two you make. And, there's ways to mitigate some of that depending on your scenario. We've had people where we've been able to mitigate all of that, and, shelter funds and stuff. There's things out there you can do sometimes. Okay. But by no means should 70 years old be a hard and fast rule. And it has been communicated that way because I think honestly, it's like, hey, wait, it's more money, right? That makes sense. But if you look at life expectancy, yeah, the average person lives, male lives to 85 or something, and a woman lives to 87. But how many people die at 75 from a heart attack, or 65? They never collected Social Security ever. What is it? It's $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities we have, and Social Security is one of those. $100+ trillion. Now, that's a problem. That's money that they don't have post 2034. They run out of money, or 2035. Maybe collecting it now might be the only time you actually get it. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen with Social Security? I'm sure not thinking I'm going to get it. And if I did, it's going to be some ridiculous joke version of it if we're going to get ourselves out of this debt and figure out our economy. But we can't have promises we don't have money to pay with. That just doesn't work. Banks don't lend to me on that. Why would our government be allowed to borrow from other countries to do that? I don't know. I think that's a real problem for us. And so I think waiting to 70 has a lot of question marks around it for me. And I would say that maybe your FRA, your full retirement age, might be an option for a lot of people, look at that and do the math. Figure out what the difference is. Look at life expectancy. Figure out where that might go.
Rule number 2 to break: follow the 4% rule. And what is the 4% rule? When I'm talking about is this distribution. Like we've got an accumulation that we've been following and averaging out at, 6%, 7%, whatever the number is you use in your calculation, whatever you've gotten, that's what you've been using. But when it comes to, pushing that money out as income, what's the right number? And because there's been, the equity side or the stock side that they've said, well, an average of 5% or 6% is what that's going to get you. It makes sense that if less than that is what they're shooting for, let's be more conservative on the distribution so that the assets don't wind up, running out before, the end of life scenario.
Running out
of money.
Don't run out of money. Don't run out of money. Seth, I think
not an option.
Yeah, not a good end to the story. If you realize that you ran out of money, then you outlived your money. That's a big problem for a lot of people. People don't understand the term Monte Carlo. It's not communicated well enough. It's a statistical understanding of how much money you can take out without spending down all of your money. I mean, it might get close to spent down, but preserving it, the numbers go down percentage-wise based on what you want to accomplish, right? It used to be 5%, and now it's dropped. I think it's actually below 4%. I think it was 3.9 at one point. 3.7 something. I can't remember what it was, but I was shocked when I heard the number. And now people just say, oh, well, just go with 4%. That's kind of the number. So, but the thing is for our listeners, right? I mean, we love stocks. We love all equities. We love the bond world. We love treasuries. We love all the investments. But you know what? Sometimes an annuity is the greatest fit for people who are concerned about income. I mean, they're an income solve for a lot of people. You can't put all your money in it, but it might get you where you want and give you the security you need. We hear people say good and bad things about annuities, but if income's what you need to accomplish, and you're really fearful of the stock market, it's a good alternative to consider. And I'm not negative on annuities. I'm not super pro. We do everything here, so that's why we call it 3-dimensional investing. But maybe an annuity can beat your 4% rule. I don't know. You have to check. I mean, depending on your age and all the different variables around that. But when we talk about this stuff, this 4% rule, if you want to use just the traditional conversation of this, Seth, you and I chat about this all the time. And I literally just was working with Tony on a client the other day, and he was like, this guy, he doesn't expect himself to live for another 15 years or more. And he needs XYZ income, and we got all these different pieces going on. He's not in great health. He's not in great shape because of the health. I mean, there's all these different complications. He honestly said, listen, I'll be lucky to live 10 years, but 15, if you plan for 15, I should be fine, and this is what I need. And we have disclosure letters, and we do stuff like that, but we're ramping up his income intentionally to meet those needs. And we have some other backdoor options we can work with if we need to. But if you're looking at your life expectancy and you're looking at your age, if you're 80 years old, maybe 4% is not a concern for you. I mean, how many people in your family have lived to 100? So,
number 3, let's go ahead and break this one right away because I can't wait. It's easing up on the stocks. So what do we mean by that? We were talking about that 60-40 portfolio earlier. Remember that? Or the 40-60 portfolio, the one that has more bonds in it than it used to. And that's been the rule of thumb is we're going to go ahead and lighten up on the stocks here, lighten up and just take it easy, roll back into those bonds. But if you take a look at this rule's been around when bonds actually had a pretty significant yield to them. They could produce income fairly well. And there were some strategies around bond ladders and all these different things that you would use to generate this ongoing income and increase it to stave off inflation. But today that just doesn't happen to be the story. So where do we go? What do we do?
Seth, when you talk about bonds, I love bonds. Bonds are great. Bonds are a great asset. Rates have gone to all-time lows. Bonds are not going to pay that much when rates are that low. That's complicated. And the problem is we live in a materialistic society. People spend almost every penny they possibly can make. And the problem is when bonds are only pushing off a small yield, even if they own the bond, it doesn't provide enough income for them to live off of. So, bond ladders, might be 0.5% or 1%, you might be 1.5%. You might be getting into those spaces. But if you've done all of your planning prior to this on Monte Carlo, like we talked about the 4% rule beforehand, or 5%, and your planner's projected that out, and you're saying to yourself, hey, listen, I can buy XYZ bond, which is a blue chip company paying me 1.5%, or I can buy their stock paying me 3%, maybe 4%. Well, the average investor is saying, well, I still don't think the company's going out of business either way. They're looking at these big blue chip companies saying, I don't think they're going anywhere. And why would I take the lesser yield when I've done this planning at 5 and now I got to take 3 or 4 on a stock or 1 on the bond? It's becoming a yield-based investment conversation. Now, yield is not a reason to buy a stock. If you're listening to this show, just because it has a high yield, that's a buyer beware scenario.
You can say the same for bonds too. Quality, there's a lot to be said for quality.
Yeah, I mean, people are racing down the train to get their bond yield. They're buying junk bonds. And that's a concerning feature as well. And I think that's, what we tell people is that, sometimes, and we've done this with some of our portfolios, we've created a moderately aggressive portfolio, Seth, that we call our 70 portfolio. And we literally trimmed the bonds and we added basically a high yield blue chip ETF. It's managed by a major manager, and it's strong, and I like it, and it's in good stead right now. That may change though as yields rise in the bond world. Maybe we push that out and we go back to more of a traditional bond. But we've adjusted. We're sticking to our plan, but we're adjusting and we're shifting and we're breaking the rules on bond versus stocks that have been going on for years.
I like how you did that there. The last one we have here to break is Medicare, and the idea that Medicare has you covered. And this is unfortunate, and it's sad. It is really unfortunate and sad to come across the scenario that that's what people believed. And the truth is that there are costs with Medicare. There's co-pays, there's medication costs, and it doesn't cover long-term care and all these other scenarios that can happen, and more frequently and higher statistically the older that you get. So being prepared for that, if there's a solution there and you're young enough and you can go ahead and do some things like an HSA and start to move money in different directions, that is an absolute total gift that you could be giving to yourself, not only from a tax basis currently, but a future taxability as well. Anyways, there's a lot to be said there. So there's a ton of work that we can do with those things, but getting out of that mentality is one of the first things we want to break, that rule and that mindset that Medicare is going to solve my problems.
Yeah, it's just not. And this is where planning comes into place, because, when you have, there's probably 5 of these things that people have, or we could probably do a show on all the misunderstandings of, what's out there and what's got your back. Medicare doesn't entirely have your back, obviously. But when you sit down with a planner, they expose those misnomers, those things that you believe to be true that aren't. And that's important. And some people will say, well, I don't need that. Well, it's usually because they think they're already covered, which is why they say they don't need it. And that's something to go through. It's something to really sit down. And I think, it always sounds like a pitch, right? I always feel, and everyone's saying, but if you have questions on this stuff, give us a call. We're happy to just kind of, hey, listen, I heard you say this, or hey, I've heard my planner tell me this. Is that true? I'm just looking for another opinion. Happy to spend a few minutes with you on the phone and chat about it, or if you want to come in. So,
well, you did it. You made it. Finish line. Folks, here we are. It's been a lot of fun, and we've been talking about making and breaking rules of retirement. You've been listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We've enjoyed the show today. We've been grateful for you for joining us. We thank you for calling us and giving us an opportunity to speak into your life and be trusted advisors with you. That's something we hold really sacred, and we want to appreciate you for that. So thank you so much. And we just also want to appreciate you for allowing us to be who we are and have fun with what we do on a daily basis, which is financial planning. You can also find us at Facebook. We're at /3D Investing. We're also on Twitter at BFG_LLC. And as always, you can also find us at yourmoneyontap.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks for liking our podcast. We appreciate you, and we can't wait to make it a great day and a great life with you here at Money on Tap.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.